So we're going to be going over the gait cycle today. So the gait cycle consists of 8 different phases, and it's basically from the heel strike of one foot to the heel strike of that same foot. So that's one completion of the gait cycle. So the first part of it, we have the stance phase, and this is the heel strike. So the anterior tibialis is contracting isometrically to hold that foot in dorsiflexion. And then at the knee, the quads are contracting eccentrically to control the knee from going too far forward. And then at the hip, the glute max is contracting isometrically to hold that hip right where it's at. The next is foot flat. So during this phase, it's exactly as it sounds. The foot comes down to flat, and that motion is controlled eccentrically by the anterior tibialis. So it's not slamming down into the ground, it's just eccentrically controlled there. Quads are still working eccentrically to control the knee from moving. And now the glute max is contracting concentrically to bring that glute hip into extension. So the next phase is our stance phase, mid stance. So the gastroc and the soleus are now contracting isometrically to hold the foot steady, basically. Quads and hamstrings during this phase aren't doing anything. They're just existing. But now the glute max is still contracting concentrically, but the glute medius is contracting isometrically to prevent that contralateral hip drop. So we have an isometric contraction of our glute med to keep us nice and upright and the hips nice and level. So after the foot flat and then mid stance, we have the heel off, where now the gastroc and the soleus are contracting concentrically to bring that heel off of the ground. So hence heel off. Quads and hams still not doing anything at the knee. But now the iliopsoas, so our hip flexors, are now eccentrically loaded. So they're being stretched, basically. So they're eccentrically contracting to control the motion at the hip. After the heel off, we have the toe off, which is the propulsion forward, essentially. So gastroc and soleus still contracting concentrically to push that heel and those toes off even more. And you guessed it, quads and hamstrings still not doing anything at the knee. And the iliopsoas is now concentrically contracting, to flex the hip forward as we go forward. So that is the stance phase. Now we move on to the swing phase. So the other leg is now planted, and now we're in the stance phase. And so after the toe off, we have the early swing, where the anterior tibialis now is going to concentrically contract to bring that foot up, so that way when we walk, we're not dragging our foot across. So the anterior tibialis is concentrically contracting. Quads and hams still are not doing anything. And the iliopsoas again is once again flexing to bring that hip forward into extension, into flexion. So after the early swing, we have the mid swing, which is right in the middle here. So anterior tibialis now, because it was already concentrically contracting, the anterior tibialis is isometrically contracting to hold the foot in dorsiflexion. Quads and hams still not active, and the iliopsoas is now concentrically still contracting. So lastly, we have the terminal swing. So the terminal swing is basically the step right before the heel strike, which starts the whole phase again. So the anterior tibialis is holding my foot here, so it's isometrically contracting, holding my foot in dorsiflexion, preparing for the next step. Now, the quads are not working as they do in the heel strike. My hamstrings are eccentrically contracting to prevent my knee from going too far forward. So they're preventing that knee extension eccentrically. And now the glute max takes over from the iliopsoas, and it is eccentrically contracting to control this too much. So we're controlling the motion at the hip from the glute max eccentrically. And then after that, you have heel strike, and that's one full cycle of the gait.